Okay, so today what I wanted to do was to go over a little bit about Angular directives and then go over a real simple examples explaining the different methods within the directives, and then go into the modules section of our app and explain some of the directives that we have inside of there to give you real world examples of how we are using directives. Okay. So directives are, for the lack of a better example, is nothing more than the ability to create custom DOM objects in your HTML5 applications. Within Angular, if you are going to do any type of DOM manipulations, you really should do the DOM manipulations within your directives and not in controllers or in services, because inside the directive is where you actually have access to the elements and attributes on a HTML element, and at the end of going through the cycles that Angular does, it will refresh the page when you do this. It also gives you the ability to grab the templates that you have and manipulate the templates, and with the linking mechanism that they have in there, will perform a lot better at that point. So let's go ahead and get started creating a new directive. So I have an application up right now. It's nothing more than this little page with its own controller. So I'm going to create a new directive called Gridbox, and I'm using the Yeoman generator or scaffolding tool. So you can see I'm doing Yo Angular :directive and giving it the name of Gridbox. So let's create this and give it just a second. Okay, so it's created my Gridbox. So we come over here. We can see in my directory, it created a new file called Gridbox inside a directive. And here is a standard directive. So at the very top, you can see here I have my module. This is the same module that is in my app.js that created the actual module, and it's called JD app. And then we are attaching a directive to it. Now you can see here, when it created the directive, it normalized the name of the element and it put it into camel case. But when you actually use this, you'll use the dash notation. So it will be grid dash box, not grid capital box. The first thing you see here is we have a template, and so this is what will actually get put into the page. This is the templates that we want to use for the directive. And then we have restrictive and link. So let's go ahead and just see this in action real quick. So here's my page over on the right-hand side. I'm going to replace all of this with my grid box. Save it. You can see here it has updated, and I now have this is a grid box directive. And here is my directive, and inside of my link function, you can see here I've taken the element and I have added text to that element of this is a grid box directive. If we actually come in and look at the element itself, you can see here's my custom element, grid box, and the text within my grid box is this is a grid box directive. Now, since we are using IE8 and IE7, they do not support custom DOM elements, and so there's a couple of ways to get around this. And the first one is on the restrictive. And there's actually several ways you can do restrictive. You can do E is element, And so what that means is just how we have it here, it will be an actual element, and that's how you define it. The next one here is A, and that means attribute. So what that means is if I can come in here, I can change this to be a div, and now the attribute is grid box. Okay, and so this will actually work and replace the div with the grid box. So if we save this real quick, I'm not sure why that did not work. Interesting. Oh, okay, I didn't save this. That's why. There we go. And so you can see here it's div, grid box, and then here's my text element. One of the things that is nice about Angular is it will recognize x-gridbox or data.gridbox as attributes. Because even within IE7, I think it is, only certain attributes are recognized as true attributes in IE7, but if you put data dash, then IE7 will recognize that as a attribute. The next one was C. So that means class. So if I come in here and I make this a class equals gridbox, and save this, you can see this actually does the same thing. So it's gridbox is a class. And the last one that is probably hardly ever used, in fact I don't think I've ever seen it, is M, which is message. And so technically what we can do is we can do a comment with gridbox in it, and this actually should work. I don't see anyone, I actually have never seen anyone use that, so I wouldn't recommend using it. I'm not for sure how long it will actually be around. So let's go back and change this back to element. The other thing that they do have to help with IE 7 and 8 is you can actually do a replace. And what the replace does, if we actually look at this element now, you can see now it doesn't have your custom element. It is now a div, and it's taking the templates that we have and replaced everything that you had inside your template and put it into your custom element. And so this is one of the ways it helps with IE7, IE8. You will see with the current documentation that they are saying it's been depreciated. The reason why they said that is because with modern browsers, all modern browsers can handle custom elements. But in the conversations that they've had behind the scenes, is they're not actually going to remove that anytime soon, because there is too many instances where people are using that to get around IE7 or get around IE8 issues. Or the other thing that happens is for SOA type calls that you get from search engines, sometimes you need that inner HTML data so that you can actually do stuff. Okay, so this actually doesn't do us a whole lot. It's just kind of replacing stuff. The next piece is, you can see here we have template, and it's a div. We can start building out this string and making a real complicated application or a real complicated template. One of the problems with that, though, is if you get something that's really complicated, then trying to put that all in a string is a little bit difficult. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to create a view called gridbox. There we go. So now we have a new view. So now we can open up that. So here's my new view. It's just a paragraph which says this is a good box view. If I now change this to be URL and give it the path to my URL, see, I don't have, let's have something spelled right. That's views. You can see now, instead of having that previous text in there, I now have this is a good box directive. Oh, okay, and now I want to take this out. There we go. This is a good box view. What happened there a second ago is, since I have my element, and we're placing the text inside of my element, it actually originally had this in there, then replaced it with the text that I wanted within my actual directive. Okay. So that doesn't, is kind of neat and cool and whatnot. Are there any questions so far? It's a very simple directive like what we have here. And everyone is on mute, so you have to unmute yourself if you need to say something. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about how directives actually work. So when we create a directive like this and we're in this main HTML, what Angular does is it will go through and on a given page at the beginning of a event cycle, it will grab all of the directives that it can find and it will put them in an array list and then order them by priority and then compile it, which means it will do any DOM manipulation that it needs to get that particular element working. And then once it finishes compiling all of the directives, it will then link all of the, it will attach scopes to the directives and then link the data bindings and watchers to the scopes at that time. So there's actually a method that you can do is compile, and it takes a function, and that function that will take an element, attributes, and transclude. And what it will return is a function. That is the linking function. Okay, so now that we've done this, one of the things I want to show you is a couple of things with this. So I'm going to do a console . Okay, so you see here with the compile function, this particular element has compiled, and so that's how we get to this line. And then this return is my linking function, which you can say in the compile linking. You can see here that I did not call this linking function. The reason being is that whenever you put a compile inside of your directive, since it returns the actual linking function, it will use that linking function instead of the one that you actually have as a data object. If you don't have the compile, and we comment this line out, you can see now it says it's in the linking function. And so what happens is that this has a parent class, and its compile will look at its child, and if it has a link object in there, it will call that function. But that cannot be called if you override your compile function inside of your object. So let's take this back. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to show this is if we come back into our HTML and we create a second grid box right next to it, you can see that we call the compile function twice. Okay, and so what happens is it grabs both of those elements, and it will compile both of them and then link both of them. But for performance reasons, one of the things that is a little bit different on some of your directives, if we do an ng repeat, and we're going to do create 5 of these. Let's see what that do. What's happening here? Why is that not working? Oh, gotta close my bracket there. That helps. Okay. You can see here is on the ng repeat, it clones each one of these grid boxes, and then because it clones it, it only calls the compile once. It doesn't call the compile every single time because Angular views this as one element. It's not multiple elements. And so whatever DOM manipulation that you're doing inside your compile should only happen once within that repeat, not every single time. But since each one of those elements may have different data, then the linking function gets called for each one of those. And it's a very distinct distinction for the compile function and a linking function, especially inside of ng repeat. It does give you a good performance boost when repeating over the same element. Okay. 99.9% of the time, you will not be using the compile function. The main reason why you would use the compile function inside your directive is if you need to do DOM manipulation before you actually link your data to your element. So an example that I've seen a lot is twizzles. Twizzle is where you would flip back and forth between two data elements, and you don't want both data elements actually in your page. So a lot of times you'll see if you have a text input field and just a text field, and you're flipping back and forth between them, a lot of times people will just put them in the page together, and then you'll show one, hide the one, and you'll flip back and forth. You can actually, with having the compile function, do some manipulation on that beforehand, and you don't necessarily have to have them both in the page at that time. You can actually remove one and put one back in and only have one element live at any given moment. And so it's a very powerful tool. But unless you really need to manipulate the element before you actually link something, I would not recommend using compile. Just let the normal compile happen, and you'll be okay. But it is important to understand that it is a compile feature on your custom elements, because sometimes you'll see elements being touched twice and you don't know why. The reason why is because you actually touch it once in the compile and once in the link. Okay, so we want to take that off, and we're going to make this a little bit more complicated. Let's see, we want div, and then inside my div I want a input and a span. Okay. So now we have some boxes. Let's take this ng repeat off right now, just so we can kind of see what we're doing. Okay, so now we have this simple box and we have data here. If I type stuff in here, nothing happens. And so, this doesn't do us a whole lot of good, but it does give us the ability that if we want to have something that's common that we want to display all the time, we can do a very basic directive that will repeat over and over again, and we know exactly what's going to be in it and what's not going to be in it. But that doesn't do us a lot of good right now. And so if we look in my grid box, let's say one of the things I want to do is I'm going to do a scope dot, let's call this my text. And so I'm going to create a scope item called my text. And in here, I'm going to do an ng model. And then in my template, oops, do something like this. And you can see now I have a basic model mapping, and it's bound for both inside of the input and also inside my span. And I have actually defined that scope item here in text. And you can see this is very, very similar to what you would do in a controller when we bind elements to the scope and we're using it inside of text elements and inside of input elements. So, that's kind of interesting because now we can add stuff to that scope and it does something kind of cool for us. But that really doesn't help us a lot. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add an attribute to my grid box called text, and I'm going to call this queen. Yeah, I saved it, and so that didn't do anything for us. But what I can do here now is I have these three elements that come into my linking. So the scope is just what it is. It's the scope. Currently, because I haven't quote isolated my scope, it is the scope of the parent element. So this will be my controller scope currently. Element is the actual element object. It is a jQuery Lite object. And so anything you can do with the jQuery Lite API, you can do on this elements. And then the last one is the attributes. And so the attributes are basically anything that comes after this. So what I can do now is I can do attributes.text. And you can see now it says queen. And so what has happened is I've taken this data here that is the attribute of text, whatever data is in there, and I have passed it in and I've attached it to the scope of my text. Okay, so now I can go in here and change, and it will change. If I look at the attributes here, you can see here inside the attributes I have text. I also have the element and then the attribute object, the actual $ attributes. But let's take a look at the element real quick also. And so here you can see that I have the actual element in Chrome. It's kind of nice because I can highlight over it, and wherever I print it out, it will show that. If I look at the actual object, it's a div and it's a jQuery object, and you have the inner HTML, inner text, and so there's anything that you need to do on this element, I can do at this point. Okay, so this is kind of neat, but there is one problem with this. If I come in back into my HTML and let's say I copy this, if I want this text to be king, you can see that both elements came back as king, king. And as I type in here, both of my elements are being updated. The reason being is that since this is, I have not isolated my scope, I've actually only created one object, and so now all of my bindings are on both objects, and so that's why you have what happens. So the way we solve this problem is we just create a scope object. Hit save, and now I have two separate objects that I'm updating. Okay, and so this is, if we, I'm going to turn this on real quick. Let's expand this a little bit, give it a little bit more room. Okay, so here is a tool within Chrome called Batarang, and what Batarang does is it gives you the ability to look at the Angular objects inside of your app. And so one of the things you can see here is you can see my scopes that I have. Scope 2 is my root scope. A child of that root scope is this 03. I know because I have awesome things here that is my controller scope here. And then I have two children, and these two children are these elements here. If I go into options, I can show scope. You can see now where these scopes are. And so you can see there's a outer scope and there's an inner scope. You can show the bindings. This is bound. And you can show where the whole application is. Okay, so this is a very helpful tool when you're trying to figure out, where all your scopes are and how scopes are being used. It does make it very easy to use that. Okay, so now I have this, but there is some other things I can do with my scopes. It seems kind of silly to pass text in and do my text, and that just doesn't seem to work all the time. And so one of the things I can do is I can come in here and I can do my text. Let's do equal text, and then get rid of this line. Oops, what happened here? My text equal to oh. Huh, that's weird. Interesting. Try this. Oh, I know why. There we go. Okay, I'll explain that here in a minute. Okay, so I use the @ equal text. What this does is this scope creates a scope item for myself, and I'm telling it that if you find an attribute called text, use it. And this @ is to do a local binding of any data that is in that. It is the string data that you are trying to get at this point. And so it's a one-way binding. And so if this was a actual scope item on my parent, it wouldn't make a change. So to show that a little bit easier, let me do this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do users. Now this shouldn't work, because what happened is it took the literal values that I have in here and passed them into my directive, because I used this @ sign. And so what I have to do in this situation is actually come in here and use the brackets to pass in what I need to pass in. Because what that means is when you actually look at this element now, you can see that the Angular has taken whatever value I have in there and actually put it into the elements that I have here. If I want to do a two-way binding, which means that if, let's do this real quick. This is a good example. So if I come up here and I want to display what's in user 1, 0, let's see, what did he get? Let's try this with a div real quick. That will make life a little bit easier. Okay, so you see here I have king. If I make a change here, it does not affect the scope item user 0 at all, because it's not a two-way binding. If I want to do a two-way binding, what I'll do is I would change this to equals. This would arrow out. Yep. And then I would take off my mustaches, and I want to actually pass in the object that I want to display. And so now you can see this is what we have the binding. So now when I change this, you can see it actually changed my parent. If the parent changes, it will actually go back in here and change my child here. Okay. And so at this point, probably the last thing I want to show as well, there's two more things I need to show real quick. So the next thing I can show here is on the scope, I can create functions that are bound to that particular element. And so if I want to do a click me, and then on my span here I have ng click. So I'll save this, and let's say we want to so now as I click this, you can see updating click here. Okay. The other thing that is very powerful on this is on this element, I can do something like this. I can actually bind a listener onto the element itself. And so this particular one is on click, I will call a function. And so you may have some custom events happening. You can listen on the actual individual element instead of just kind of globally listen to things. Another key piece is there will be situations, and I'll show you some of the other code, where we want to observe. So this will be like text. And so what will happen here is anytime the text, whatever got passed in as text, changes, then this observe will actually fire off, and then you can actually do something with it. Okay. It's different than a watch because a watch is on a scope item, and so if I do a watch on my text, then anytime my text changes, that will fire off and will do something. Observe is anything that you pass into the directive that you haven't attached to the scope already. And you may not even attach to the scope. So there is a difference between observe and watch. There's subtle differences, but they're all a little bit of differences. And the last thing I want to show you real quick before we move on is transclude. Okay, so let's get this back to a nice little point. Okay, so I may have a situation where this particular directive will have some HTML text inside of my element. So here you have grid box, and then what I did was I put a body text inside of it, and then a grid box. So if I save this, you can see that that never shows up. The reason being is that when the directive is created and compiled and changed, it does not know anything about what is inside of your element. It is only looking at your element and then making changes based on that. It replaces anything inside your grid box with your template that you're using. And so anything inside your between your tag elements will actually get replaced. But there is a way around that. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to create a new div here. And I'm going to put in here ng transclude and close that div out. And okay, I've got an error here because what I need to do here now is I need to do a transclude equals true. And you see now my body text has shown up. And so what this means is that ng transclude means take anything that you have inside of my element and bring it into my custom element. And the way I display this is by this little piece here where I do ng transclude. So if we actually look at this text here, you can see here, here's my div, and it took anything that was in between my tag elements and placed it inside of that div. Okay, and this is how you would bring things in. One of the cool things about it, though, is I can actually here you can see here I have this transclusion is actually a function which has a scope and a attached object. And so now I have the ability, since I have this transclude function, to grab this element and do things with. And you'll see here in a minute, we actually do that with the split pane because we actually want to look inside of the elements that we are bringing into our custom element and manipulate them a little bit to be able to do the split plane properly. Okay, so that's real quick on some of the things you can do with directives. There is one other piece I just kind of want to talk real quick about. There's a type. This gives you the HTML, SVG, or math. What this is, default is HTML, but what that means is that in your template you have to have a opening and closing HTML tag, which means it has to be like a div and it has to close with a div. You can't have it wide open and have two divs in your template at the top level. There has to be one parent and one parent only. In SVG and math, what that means is that instead of being any HTML element, it has to be an SVG element or a math element that is the parent element inside of your div. So I just want to make sure you guys know about that. And there is also the ability to do, there's a required. What required means is that there is another element that has to be above this element. And so an example would be, actually do it here. So I have my grid box here. Say now I have a grid text element. I can, inside of my grid text, it says that a required element is grid box. And so I would in here say required something like this. Okay, and what that means is that my parent, in the tree, DOM tree, I have to have a parent of grid box somewhere. It may not be the exact element above me, but above me I have to have that element. The reason why this is interesting is that you can actually also have a controller method, which is a function. And what this does is when you have required directives, the controller function is shared between all of those directives. And so what it does is it gives you the ability to communicate between your directives, but not necessarily communicate outside of the directives. Okay. I don't know how often you guys would use this, probably very little for most of your stuff, but if you're making some really complicated nested elements, this may be something that you would use. Okay, so we got about 10 to 15 more minutes. That's, I want to stop here for right now and talk more about some of all custom elements that we have. But before I get started, is there any questions from anyone yet? Let me unmute everyone real quick. Okay, everyone's unmuted. So any questions? Okay, everyone's getting muted then. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about all custom directives that we have. So here on the left-hand side, you can see our tree. One of the things we did was for common directives, we wanted to put them into their own modules. And so that's why we have the modules directory here. Okay, we divided up the modules a little bit just so things that were very specific to UI would be in the UI. If there were services like log services and default values, they went into the services. And then we have one for OIT navigation, which is kind of a common navigation tool that we wanted to separate back out. But I wanted to show some of these because they're all kind of interesting. So let's look at this one first. This is a split pane. So if you look at binders and you look at binders and charts are both using the split pane. And the split pane is where you have a taggable element that you can slide back and forth to be able to see things in one pane or another pane. So this is a little bit different in the fact of here's my template. It's fairly simple. You can see that we have my parent div here, and then we have a left pane, a right pane, and a main pane. Okay. So the template itself is not very complicated. We have an NG-click on toggling the bar, and we have these classes that are bento driven to give us the look and feel that we wanted. But the reason why this is interesting is because you can see here we have the transclude, and here's the transclude function right here. Okay, and what I did here was I am going into my element and I'm looking for certain things, and so I'm stepping through anything, all the parent tags, looking for things that a class, whether it's left pane, content pane, and right pane, and if I find them, then what I'm doing is I'm appending them to elements within my template here. So what I did here is this template here is grabbing my element. So here's my element, my top level element. I'm looking for the splitter group, and so that's this guy. And so I've grabbed this element, and then inside of that element, I'm looking for an aside splitter left. And so what I've done here is I've actually grabbed this particular element here. Okay, and then what I do is if I find inside of my transclude, if I find a element that has a class of left pane, then I'm taking that content here and I'm appending it to this inside of here. Okay. Same thing with the content pane and same thing with the right pane. Okay. So what this does is it gives us the ability to have a HTML tags inside of our element, but they're not just being transcluded into one spot. We're actually taking bits of it and transcluding it into different sections. And so in a way, this is a manual version of transclusion. Okay. And then here you can see where we grabbed attributes and from the parent class, and we're just assigning them to elements that we need to track for a particular piece here. One thing you also will see is we did not isolate the scope here. The main reason being is this split pane, there should only be one. There should never be multiple split panes in a page, and so we didn't need to worry about two of them working together and doing something at the same time. And then we wanted to have the ability to call back out to its parent to be able to do things. So here you can see where we have the callbacks. So one of the attributes is expand event and collapse event. So if you pass in a function to us, we'll evaluate it, look for it on the scope. If we find it, then we'll assign it to our expand callback, and then we can call its parent callback function. If you don't have a attribute assigned to the callback events, then we just create a dummy function that doesn't do anything. Okay, so split pane is kind of neat. tree navigation. Here's one of the things I wanted to kind of show about tree navigation that is one of the reasons why I really like directives. So you see here we have this last watch directive. And what it does is if we come back down here to our template, you'll see here we have a ng repeat. And then what we do is we're looking at certain attributes to decide whether or not we actually want to attach that function, that attribute directive called last watch. And so what it does is it works in tandem with ng repeat. And so what it does is we will load 200 node items, and then the ng repeat will stop because we do a limit to here. Here we go, limit string. So we have a filter here called limit to, and that will have 200. When this directive is watching the attribute called, or the scope item called last, when last gets called, it will call a function on the parent called load more. And that load more, what it does is it will change this limit amount and add another 200 elements to it. Okay, and so what the example of is that you don't necessarily, for your directives, it doesn't have to be just putting elements on the page. It can also be watching and listening for certain things that happen on your DOM and do something when something happens. So you'll see on the Angular teams like ng click, ng submit, ng drag, ng drop. Those are all directives that you can add to your elements that don't necessarily mean that it is trying to display something. Okay. The other thing that we do in this particular directive that's a little bit unique is in our element here, we don't have a true template. And you can see here, return, we have restricted. It can be a element or attribute. We had to do the attribute because of IE8. And then we don't isolate scope. And then you can see here we don't have a template. The reason why is because this is a recursive element, which means you can see, what is it? Oh, down here. You can see inside of here we have a tree navigation data attribute. And so this is the same element that's calling. So one of the things we had to do with this particular directive is make it where this template can be done dynamically, because we are passing stuff in from its parent, which hasn't been compiled yet, and so we're still needing to pass it and build this template together. And so what we did here was we created a function called parent element string, and we have the attributes that we're passing into it. And what will happen is you can see here at the bottom, what we did was we take this parent element, the string, and we actually call the compile inside of our inside our directive here. And what this will do is it will call the compile function and compile this HTML string into a Angular version of the string, and then we just append it inside of our HTML. And then we have all the other functions. So we have a double click function, single function, all the things that we would normally do. What this does for us is it gives us the ability to manipulate our DOM objects or HTML string before we actually compile it, and we can compile it later after we've substituted all the things that we need to substitute with it, and then append it to the HTML. The other thing here is we actually do a on destroy. So when this element actually gets destroyed or removed, then we can actually call this function and it will clean up our tree at this point. And then you can see here, once again, on our callbacks is we're asking for scope items, callback functions, and we'll assign those callback functions to something in all directives so we can call these guys back. And so these are actually functions that will be into the parent. And then I think the only other thing we have in here is this factory. So this tree selection factory is just the ability to know what nodes we have selected and which nodes we don't have selected, and then find elements on a tree for when we load up, and then we want to actually select a node on the tree after it gets loaded. Let's see here. The other one that I really want to show, is it this one? Okay, here. Yeah. So on OIT menu, the important piece here is you can see that we do create a unique scope here. And these @ signs means that we're doing one-way binding. So we just grab the string and then we'll bind it to our scope, but the parents will never get changed. But here we do have a two-way binding update menu. When you see nothing behind here, what it means is it looks for this name on as an attribute. Okay. What I wanted to show on this one was this. And so you can see here what we've done is whenever we pass in a current item as an attribute, we'll observe it. And if this guy ever changes, then we'll fire off this observe. And so we have a new value and an old value. If we have a new value, then we'll execute this code. If we don't, then I think that this ends down at the bottom here. But we don't have this current item. You can see nowhere within here have we ever attached the current item to the scope, because we actually don't need it on the scope. We're not ever going to do anything with it. It's actually something that gets passed into us. But we do want to know when it changes, because then we have to do some stuff within our code. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why we use attributes observe at this point. If we attach this to the actual scope, then at that point we can use the $watch. Okay, so that's about all the time we have right now. Let me unmute everyone. Anyone have any questions? Okay, and if we need to talk more about some of the other pieces of directives, please email me and we'll go over those. And like I said, I'll probably do a training later this week on services and filters. So I guess that's about it. If no one has any questions, then we'll go ahead and close this call out. All right, thanks everyone.